Putin targets civilians' homes. Ukraine's revenge was instant and brutal. War has rules, written and unwritten. Even in its darkest moments, there are lines that, once crossed, change the nature of the conflict forever. One of those lines is the deliberate targeting of civilian homes. When missiles fall not on military bases, but on apartment buildings, schools, and sleeping families, the message is unmistakable. This is no longer about territory, it is about fear. In Ukraine, that line was crossed again and again. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Ordinary people, far from any front line, became targets. And while the world watched in horror, Ukraine did not respond with chaos or blind rage. Instead, its response was calculated, immediate, and devastating in ways Russia did not expect. Civilian homes as a strategy. The targeting of civilian infrastructure was not accidental. It followed a clear and repeated pattern. Residential buildings, power grids, water facilities, and heating systems were struck with increasing frequency. The goal was not military advantage in the traditional sense. It was psychological pressure. The Kremlin believed that by making daily life unbearable, Ukraine's population would turn inward, demanding compromise or surrender. Fear, cold, and exhaustion were meant to do what armored divisions could not. This strategy relied on a familiar assumption that civilian morale is fragile and easily broken. But Ukraine's experience of war had already reshaped its society. Instead of panic, the strikes created shared resolve. Instead of isolation, they produced unity. Each destroyed home became evidence that surrender would not bring safety. It would only invite more destruction. The psychological calculation. Targeting civilians is not just about physical damage. It is psychological warfare designed to exhaust a population emotionally. Darkness during winter, silence after explosions, and the constant uncertainty of the next strike are intended to erode resistance over time. Russia believed this pressure would fracture Ukraine internally, but it underestimated the power of collective endurance. When civilians became direct targets, the line between battlefield and home disappeared. Resistance became personal. Survival became defiance. Rather than weakening morale, the attacks hardened it. Fear was replaced by preparation. Anger replaced despair, and the psychological weapon Russia relied upon lost its effectiveness. Ukraine's response: speed and precision. Ukraine's retaliation was not symbolic. It was immediate and strategic. Rather than mirroring attacks on civilians, Ukrainian forces struck assets that directly supported Russia's war effort. Command centers, ammunition depots, logistics hubs, and airfields suddenly found themselves under sustained pressure. These strikes were not random. They were carefully selected, based on intelligence and timing. Ukraine demonstrated that it could reach far beyond the front lines, into areas once considered secure. The response was brutal in effectiveness, not in indiscrimination. The message was unmistakable. Attacking civilian homes would not weaken Ukraine. It would expose Russia's vulnerabilities. The role of intelligence and timing. Ukraine's ability to respond so quickly depended on intelligence dominance. Real-time surveillance, satellite imagery, and coordinated analysis allowed strikes to be precise and confident. There was no need for mass bombardment. Every action had purpose. Timing played a critical role. Counterstrikes often followed civilian attacks closely, creating a direct link between cause and consequence. This reinforced deterrence without abandoning moral restraint. Ukraine showed that retaliation could be decisive without becoming indiscriminate. That contrast reshaped global perception of the conflict. Why the response was brutal but controlled. Brutality in war does not always mean chaos. In this case, it meant effectiveness. Ukrainian strikes targeted systems Russia could not easily replace. Air defense units were stretched thin, supply routes were disrupted, forward positions lost protection. Each successful operation forced Russia to divert resources away from offense and toward defense. Protecting rear areas became as urgent as holding the front. The war expanded geographically, but not strategically in Russia's favor. Ukraine escalated intelligence on, not emotionally, the failure of intimidation. The strategy of terrorizing civilians has failed many times in history, and in Ukraine it failed again. Instead of silence, it generated outrage. Instead of isolation, it brought increased international support. Air defense systems improved. Financial aid expanded. Diplomatic backing strengthened. Each strike on a residential building reinforced Ukraine's legitimacy on the world stage. Russia's actions narrowed its diplomatic options and deepened its isolation. What was meant to crush resistance ended up reinforcing it. The consequences beyond the damage. The impact of these attacks extended far beyond destroyed buildings. Patterns emerged, and patterns in war invite countermeasures. Ukraine adapted quickly, air defenses were repositioned, early warning systems improved. Civilian response protocols became faster and more coordinated. Hospitals, schools, and shelters were better protected. Evacuation routes were mapped in real time. Communities shared information across social networks, allowing residents to anticipate attacks with remarkable precision. Over time, even the psychological shock Russia depended on began to fade. Sirens no longer caused paralysis. They triggered action. Preparation replaced panic. Families practiced drills, and local authorities ran simulations to keep civilians ready. This shift alone neutralized much of the intended terror. At the same time, Ukraine's military confidence grew. Each successful counterstrike refined the next. Positions once thought safe were reassessed. Depth no longer guaranteed protection. The idea of a secure rear area slowly disappeared. The moral contrast that shaped the war. International observers noticed something critical. Ukraine maintained moral clarity. Civilian targets were avoided. The distinction became impossible to ignore. One side struck homes, the other struck military infrastructure. This contrast influenced global decisions. It shaped narratives, sustained long-term support, and strengthened Ukraine's diplomatic position. Sanctions, aid, and political pressure became direct consequences of these ethical differences. Inside Ukraine, civilian resilience fed directly into military effectiveness. Communities adapted. Volunteers supported logistics. Stability at home preserved focus at the front. Russia's strategy meant to separate civilians from resistance, fuse them together instead. Local defense initiatives, community-run shelters, and volunteer supply networks demonstrated that civilian resolve could become a force multiplier in modern warfare. What this means for modern warfare. This phase of the conflict will be studied for decades. It shows that targeting civilians is not just morally wrong, but strategically flawed. It proves that restraint, when combined with precision, can be more powerful than overwhelming force. Modern conflicts increasingly reward intelligence, coordination, and adaptive strategy over sheer destruction. Ukraine demonstrated that revenge does not need to be reckless to be devastating. Discipline, intelligence, and timing can reshape a war faster than terror ever could. Consequences, not fear. When civilian homes were targeted, Ukraine did not respond with fear. It responded with consequence. Fast, precise, and brutal where it mattered most. This war is not only about weapons or territory, it is about choices, and every choice carries a cost. If you found this documentary powerful and want more deep, well-researched stories like this, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support helps us continue bringing high-quality documentary content to life.